2020 was a year I will never forget. The largest pandemic in history exploded and paralyzed the world.
You must stay at home.
It marked a milestone in humanity, a before and after in social dynamics, millions of deaths recorded, and only one solution.
Como un verdadero regalo de Navidad llegaron las primeras vacunas. México es el primer país de América Latina en recibir las vacunas.
Pero hoy es el principio del fin.
We live in a world at war, with extreme poverty, bankrupt countries, and alarming corruption. COVID-19 accelerated the deterioration we are experiencing globally and sowed panic among people. It all happened under the watchful eye of a hyper-connected audience. 70% of the world's population, more than 5 billion people, have internet access. This allowed us to exchange information and navigate a pandemic like never before in history.
Este fenómeno social ha mostrado cómo los ciudadanos hemos abrazado la tecnología como aliada contra la pandemia. ¿O todo lo contrario?
Behind every app we use, there's a company that defines its censorship policy. They decide what's allowed to be searched, done, said, and what isn't.
Estas empresas no son transparentes en políticas precisamente de sanciones en contra de los usuarios. ¿O qué consideras discurso discriminatorio? ¿O qué consideras incitar a la violencia? ¿Dónde queda eso? No lo sabemos.
YouTube, with over 2.5 billion users, is no exception.
Anything that would go against World Health Organization recommendations would be a violation of our policy, and so remove is another really important part of our policy.
Seeking to prevent the spread of fake news, free debate between scientists, doctors, and virologists with differing viewpoints isn't allowed. From the beginning of the pandemic, there were dissidents, people from all over the world who disagreed with the measures that were being implemented. Anyone who dares to question official information from the WHO, the FDA, or their own government is automatically labeled as believing in conspiracy theories, and as a result, everything they say loses value.
Na sample za vitu vingine mbalimbali tukavipeleka pale kwenye maabara. Papai lile lilikuwa positive kwamba lina corona. Lazima kuna watu wameambiwa positive wakati si wagonjwa wa corona.
A large number of professionals claim that, in fact, there is an effective treatment for COVID-19 and many other diseases. They present clinical trials in humans with no side effects and at a low cost to the population.
Nos cambió la vida porque además, conociendo el dióxido de cloro y todas las aplicaciones que tiene para otras enfermedades, empezamos a tomar todos en la familia y todos recuperamos de distintas dolencias.
Is there an alternative treatment for COVID-19? If it really works, why wasn't it widely disseminated? This is off.
Más de 50,000 personas lo están tomando. Si tú ves ahorita la cola que hay, las colas son de 500, 800 personas diariamente, 3 colas.
When I first heard about chlorine dioxide, I was intrigued by the story behind it.
Hello, I'm Jim Humble. I'm the guy who discovered MMS.
I began an investigation and found courses, forums, patents, clinical and toxicological trials that support the therapeutic use of chlorine dioxide. On the other hand, the media and official entities attacked and asserted its toxicity. But why this stark contradiction?
It has been said and written that the use of sodium chloride cleans the body within 1 hour to 4 hours of the malaria parasite. 100% cured people, less than 5 days, all within 24 hours to 48 hours. That asks for further investigation.
Taking the pandemic and chlorine dioxide as a starting point, I decided to make this documentary with the purpose of questioning the world we live in and its social dynamics. Searching for an answer, I encountered the greatest conflict in the history of humankind: the control over information. In the 21st century, telecommunications have grown exponentially. The technology that exists in 2025 is unprecedented, and consequently, the information circulating on the internet is practically infinite. The need to rely on trustworthy sources is what allows us to satisfy our search for information and knowledge about the world. Each person creates a worldview based on their context, life experiences, and the information they consume daily. When someone who trusts official sources encounters someone who questions that information, a cognitive and emotional conflict arises. In psychology, This phenomenon is called cognitive dissonance.
La disonancia cognitiva es un concepto psicológico que hace referencia a un estado emocional desagradable que aparece por la discrepancia entre ideas y creencias que tenemos acerca de algo. Esta sensación desagradable nos lleva a realizar conductas o crear justificaciones que eliminen o que reduzcan la disonancia y con ello pues, el malestar. Lo cual, en la práctica, pues, implica muchas veces el hecho de mentirnos a nosotros mismos.
This unconscious psychological barrier of society is one of the biggest obstacles when it comes to listening and analyzing what the deniers say.
¿Quiénes dominan el mundo? Bueno, te damos nombre. Rothschild, Rockefeller, Blackfein, Goldschmidt, Barbour.
¿Pero vos creés de verdad que esa gente...
¿Vos no creés de verdad?
Que tienen noción de lo que pasa en Montevideo en el 2019, que acá hay un proceso eleccionario, que quién gana, quién no...
¿No existe el Club Bilderberg?
Pues capaz que existe, pero no,
creo
que...
No, existe.
Pero una cosa es que existe y otra cosa es que dominen el planeta, que estén ahí atrás de lo que vamos a comprar hoy de noche para cenar.
No es que te digan qué vas a comer. O sí. O sí.
Apparently, many people disagree with the official version of events. While there are countless versions of what is happening in the world, there are millions of people that agree on some fundamental points. They argue that there is a global elite known as the deep state.
But what am I doing? I'm fighting the deep state. I'm fighting the swamp. And I said I was doing it, and I'm exposing the swamp.
En una publicación en su cuenta de Twitter, Trump afirmó que el estado profundo de la FDA está haciendo muy difícil que las farmacéuticas consigan gente para los ensayos clínicos. Con estado profundo, el mandatario estadounidense hace referencia a grupos de poder encubiertos que actúan en paralelo a su agenda política. No obstante, no existe evidencia alguna que apoye dichas incriminaciones.
The interest of this elite is to control the masses through the economy, science, politics, and religion.
I think that I've been blamed for everything. I am basically there to make money. I cannot and do not look at the social consequences of what I do.
Many criticize the education system for not evolving or seeking to motivate new generations. It's not in the system's interest for people to know about personal finance or mental health. Encouraging art and creativity is a problem for the system.
The negative impact of population growth on all of our planetary ecosystems is becoming appallingly evident.
International organizations created out of necessity with supranational power in their actions. These organizations are controlled by the elite to achieve their objectives, and governments are the ones responsible for replicating what is defined globally.
El poder, identificar el poder en este país y en el mundo contemporáneo con estar en el gobierno es una burrada.
Tenés razón.
Es una burrada.
Pero ser presidenta de una nación es poderoso,
Es una
Cristina.
parte,
¿Cómo
es
que no?
una parte
Un
del
poquito.
poder.
Si no es el que te maneja todo.
Si me lo decís el 100% y el 25% te digo que es.
Could there really be a group of families that decide over governments and international organizations? Do they control the media? Do they want to depopulate the world? This is Off.
La Comisión de Salud del Congreso tenía preparada para hoy la presentación del biofísico alemán Andreas Ludwig Kalker, el principal promotor del uso del dióxido de cloro en la lucha contra el coronavirus. De inmediato las críticas llovieron y la comunidad científica cuestionó esta invitación, por lo que todo fue cancelado.
When Googling for news about Andreas Kalker, I observed that all of them point to miracle cures, bleach, toxicity, and death. Wikipedia describes him as a former German music producer with no scientific background who promotes and sells chlorine dioxide. The article focuses on his informal education, controversial statements about chlorine dioxide, misinformation regarding COVID-19, and extensive details about his arrests, trials, and cancellations.
La Seremi de Salud presentó un recurso de protección para suspender un seminario donde se promocionará el clorito de sodio como la cura para enfermedades como el cáncer o el autismo.
Engaño, un gran engaño. Dar a sus niños esta solución puede hacerles bien.
I found many news articles and websites talking about Andreas and the controversies he generates. But what is the media saying about chlorine dioxide itself, beyond its main promoter?
El dióxido de cloro en el cuerpo puede tener las consecuencias del cianuro.
El Ministerio de Salud emitió una alerta sanitaria para evitar el uso de la sustancia.
El dióxido de cloro es un gas sintético que no ocurre de manera natural.
es una molécula muy simple que se compone de 2 átomos de oxígeno y 1 de cloro. Es el mejor desinfectante conocido hasta la fecha, ya que elimina hongos, parásitos, virus y bacterias, incluso las multiresistentes. El dióxido de cloro es selectivo y reaccionará en aquellos lugares en donde los patógenos generan un pH más ácido que nuestro cuerpo. No actúa intoxicando a los patógenos como suele hacer la medicación, evitando así más tóxicos al cuerpo.
El Comité Científico Nacional identificó 8 posibles efectos secundarios por el uso de dióxido de cloro.
Tanto de la Sociedad Argentina de Toxicología, como lo hizo el ANMAT en su momento y la Food and Drug Administration en Estados Unidos, no se recomienda bajo ningún punto de vista.
¿Sirve para algo? O sea, para el COVID nada. Para el COVID nada.
Ni para nada.
Para nada.
Ni
No hay
para el
evidencia
COVID
científica.
ni para nada.
On one hand, I find courses that explain the use of chlorine dioxide, provide scientific information, show patents and clinical trials. On the other side, statements, accusations, and censorship. This is off. What do international organizations and health ministries say?
Es un gusto saludarlos desde Uruguay.
I began by investigating whether my country's Ministry of Health had issued any statement on the matter. In April 2020, a statement was released warning about the risks of chlorine dioxide, asserting that there was no scientific evidence to support its use. A chlorine dioxide consumer, who claims to have been using it for over 10 years, sent an email to the ministry demanding the scientific research that supported their claims. He also recommended them to get in contact with Andreas Kalker, citing his website.
Desde hace 13 años investigo, estudio el dióxido de cloro con seriedad, método científico y compromiso. Decidí contribuir con mis estudios y liberar mis patentes a la comunidad mundial para ser usados a favor de los seres humanos y descarto por completo la toxicidad del CDS.
Massive pressure led to the removal of the statement from the website in less than 48 hours. 3 months later, the ministry issued a new statement reaffirming its position and citing official agencies from UK, Argentina, Spain, and Canada. In 2020, the National Drug Administration of Argentina published a statement on the adverse effects of chlorine dioxide, based on a report from the Pan American Health Organization. It also refers to a statement from the administration itself in 2016, warning about the toxicity of this substance. Back in 2010, the Spanish Agency for Medicines and Health Products already denounced its illegality and adverse effects. During the pandemic, the agency again warned about the high risk involved in consuming chlorine dioxide, or MMS, citing international organizations as support. After analyzing these 3 cases, I wanted to know which other ministries had issued similar statements against chlorine dioxide. I found out that Canada, Chile, Bolivia, Brazil, Colombia, Peru, France, Mexico, Germany, England, Australia, and Ecuador issued similar alerts. Finally, I reviewed the statements issued by the FDA of the United States, the world's leading authority on drug review and approval. It issued warnings about chlorine dioxide on at least 5 occasions. In December 2019, the agency made the following statement: "Those who consume MMS are drinking bleach."
El clorito sódico no es lejía, que es el hipoclorito sódico, de la misma manera que el agua, H2O, no es agua oxigenada, H2O2.
In another of its statements, the FDA highlighted the fatal adverse effects of chlorine dioxide.
En toda la historia no ha matado ni una sola persona por ingestión oral, ni uno.
As hard as I tried, I couldn't find any clinical trials to support the accusations made by the ministries. What I did observe is that they all cite international organizations or statements from other countries as their sources. It would seem that citing each other functions as the sole validation tool, and this can generate confirmation bias. If everyone cites each other as a reference, but no research is presented to support their statements, validation occurs solely due to the trust we place in these institutions, not because they offer solid and well-founded arguments. It's clear that for all official bodies, chlorine dioxide is a completely harmful substance. But why do people continue to investigate it, exposing themselves by saying otherwise? Are there politicians in the world who defend this conspiracy theory stance?
Can you repeat what you just said, please? Well, last Friday, I received a 7-page document that sort of told me that I had pneumonia but was never tested for COVID-19, but who had no symptoms, that it would be appropriate to diagnose on the death certificate COVID-19.
Bill Gates già nel 2018 profetizzava una pandemia, poi simulata lo scorso ottobre nell'Event 201, in accordo con gli amici di Davos. Ed ormai da decenni si prodiga nello sviluppo di piani di depopolamento e controllo dittatoriale sulla politica globale.
Event 201, a global pandemic exercise. In October 2019, prior to the emergence of COVID, the world's most important institutions and organizations met to simulate how they would respond to a global pandemic. The then executive director of the World Health Organization, Michael Ryan, gave a presentation on the simulation, officially launching it.
The scenario you will be presented with this morning could easily become one shared reality one day.
Welcome to Event 201.
A new coronavirus spreads silently within herds. Each infected person in turn infects on average 2 more people, 16 times as many cases in a month, unless we find a way to interrupt transmission. CAPS is a serious respiratory disease.
A majority of Americans expect a vaccine to be available within 2 months, and 65% of those polled are eager to take the vaccine, even if it's experimental. In related news, a significant demand for personal protective equipment like N95 masks and gloves are on the rise due to the pandemic.
It's truly astonishing to see the similarity between what was presented in this simulation and the pandemic we all experienced a few months later.
Yo los exhorto a que se contacten con el alcalde de San José de Chiquitos, en Santa Cruz de la Sierra, y países latinoamericanos que tienen, por ejemplo, autorizado el uso del dióxido de cloro.
Y ustedes miran, bueno, pero la Organización Mundial de la Salud dice una cosa, después dice otra. Sí, es cierto, pero bueno, sigue siendo la palabra mundial autorizada. Y está Mónica Frade. A ver.
Corrección, ¿puedo hacer una corrección?
Todas las necesarias.
No propicio el uso ni el consumo. Lo que propicio, pido y voy a seguir pidiendo al Gobierno Nacional es que aprueben los ensayos clínicos para que de una vez por todas el pueblo argentino podamos saber quién de la comunidad científica tiene razón, porque nos dicen por un lado que lo desaconsejan y otra media biblioteca o una parte de esa biblioteca nos dicen que se está aplicando y con buenos resultados. Entonces entiendo que es razonable que por el derecho a la información y a la salud que tenemos todos, se habilite los estudios para que finalmente todos podamos saber la verdad de esto.
Somos muchos los diputados que consumimos dióxido de cloro. Es que todos hemos pedido que en este país se investigue con certeza por parte del Estado el uso del dióxido de cloro. Pero no se investiga.
Me da mucho gusto darle la bienvenida a la doctora Patricia Callisperis.
Buenas tardes, muchísimas gracias a todos. Bueno, quiero dar a conocer toda la experiencia que hemos vivido aquí en Bolivia, que yo creo que es importante que el mundo lo sepa.
How could the use of chlorine dioxide have been approved in Bolivia in 2020? I researched the topic and found out that in June 2020, an emergency committee approved a decree regulating the therapeutic use of chlorine dioxide in patients with COVID-19. Despite the progress and positive results in this critical context, the Bolivian Ministry of Public Health issued an official statement advising against the consumption of chlorine dioxide. The Minister of Health at the time, Adi Roca, said,
El Ministerio de Salud no autoriza la utilización, ni la administración, ni el uso de este producto porque se tiene todas las evidencias científicas de los efectos negativos que produce en la salud de la población.
In September 2020, disregarding the ministry's statement, the Legislative Assembly of La Paz passed a law authorizing the production, distribution, and use of chlorine dioxide for the prevention, care, and treatment of COVID-19 in the Department of La Paz. the University of Bolivia produced and distributed the chlorine dioxide with military assistance.
Todos los que estamos acá usamos el dióxido de cloro, estamos inmunizados, hemos estado con personas COVID positivas, no nos hemos contagiado y tenemos miles de casos de personas que han recuperado su salud. Por eso invitamos a que las autoridades den la oportunidad. Estamos apelando a los estamentos de control que velan por el cumplimiento de la Constitución para que pueda acceder con la fórmula. Entonces yo lo hago como presidente de la Coalición Mundial Salud y Vida a nivel internacional y de aquí del país.
It's shocking to hear these statements in the midst of a pandemic, when vaccines didn't even exist. When I researched about the Comusav, I found out that in 2020, hundreds of doctors and professionals from around the world joined together with the purpose of confronting the pandemic. In November of that same year, the Comusav issued a dossier titled Chlorine Dioxide, a safe and potentially effective solution to overcome COVID-19. This document presents background information on chlorine dioxide, its toxicity, and the preclinical and clinical studies on which these claims are based.
El día de hoy tengo el honor de presentarles los resultados del primer estudio in vivo en el cual se comprobó el efecto antiviral del dióxido de cloro en un organismo vivo. Lo más importante es que hubo una no toxicidad. A las dosis utilizadas no se encontró evidencia de ninguna toxicidad inducida por el dióxido de cloro en ninguno de los tejidos y órganos.
In recent years, hundreds of thousands of people have joined together to create organizations that seek freedom of information, health, and knowledge. I wonder, who benefits from misinformation? Who are these organizations fighting against? Who owns the world's largest pharmaceutical companies?
Vjerovati da farmaceutska industrija želi zdrave građane je isto kao I vjerovati da vojna industrija želi mir u svijetu.
Investigating the world's leading pharmaceutical companies, Moderna, United Health Group, Johnson & Johnson, Abbott and Pfizer, among others, I realized that these laboratories have Vanguard, BlackRock, and State Street as their main shareholders. These three institutions are the most powerful investment funds in the world, and it's clear they have a significant influence on laboratories and pharmaceutical companies. But do they invest in other industries?
BlackRock tiene, entre otras empresas estas, tiene 440 empresas norteamericanas, 29 empresas en Alemania. Tiene intereses en la Reserva Federal de los Estados Unidos, lo que genera los dólares a nivel mundial. Bayer, Apple, Santander, Coca-Cola, Bunge, Telecom, Telefónica, Repsol, General Electric, Amazon, Microsoft, Google. Todo esto, en todas estas empresas y muchas más.
I want to point something out. That these three giant companies, BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard, they own 88% of the S&P 500. There's something wrong with that.
BlackRock, Vanguard I State Street, ti fondovi imaju udjele u svim važnim farmaceutskim, medijskim, oružanim, transportnim tvrtkama I bankama, što u prijevodu znači da ne samo da su vlasnici svih važnih svjetskih tvrtki, nego da uistinu posjeduju I cijelu svjetsku ekonomiju.
Is it really possible that a few people control everything around us and we can't even see it?
There's two kinds of dangers. One is what I just talked about, that we've arranged a society based on science and technology in which nobody understands anything about science and technology. And this combustible mixture of ignorance and power, sooner or later, is going to blow up in our faces. I mean, who is running the science and technology in a democracy if the people don't know anything about it? And the second reason that I'm worried about this is that science is more than a body of knowledge. It's a way of thinking, a way of skeptically interrogating the universe with a fine understanding of human fallibility. If we are not able to ask skeptical questions, to interrogate those who tell us that something is true, to be skeptical of those in authority, then we're up for grabs for the next charlatan, political or religious, who comes ambling along.
I began this investigation more than 5 years ago, analyzing and classifying over 7,000 downloaded files. Without an answer. Why do they insist that chlorine dioxide is toxic, but they never prove it with conclusive studies. CDS is a chemical compound, and therefore, it cannot be patented. No laboratory, company, or person can own it. It's humanity's heritage. It belongs to all of us. The struggle for control over the information is a fact. If censorship weren't so aggressive, what would happen? I don't know if I'll ever have answers. But the important thing is to keep questioning. Miracle cures? Billion-dollar pharmaceuticals? Disinformation campaigns? Safe vaccines? A dominant elite? International organizations? This is off.